Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling some seriously brain-bending mysteries. Ancient manuscripts and codes that have stumped, well, pretty much everybody for centuries. And we're using, you guessed it, YouTube videos to guide us through these crazy puzzles.
It's really incredible how these ancient texts can still, grab our attention after all this time. They
Yeah,
offer these little glimpses into the past, whispering secrets about, I don't know, lost civilizations and forgotten ways of thinking.
totally. Like every single one is a locked door, right? And we're here to try all the keys we can find.
Exactly.
Today we're focusing on three big ones. We've got a 300-year-old book made of linen found in Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's the infamous Voynich Manuscript, the one nobody can crash.
Right, right.
And of course, gotta talk about the legendary Ark of the Covenant. Where do you even begin with something like that?
Well, each one has its own quirks. They force us to think about deciphering the past in completely different ways. Let's start with that linen book. Can you imagine? You're unhapping a mummy, and instead of papyrus, boom, a whole book made of linen.
Okay, that's pretty wild. And not just any linen, right? This was like the longest Etruscan text ever found.
Yeah, it was originally one giant sheet over 11 feet long. Then whoever wrapped the mummy tore it into strips. Amazingly, though, we can still read about 60% of it, written in both black and red ink. And here's the kicker. The linen itself is about 300 years older than the mummy it was wrapped around. So you have this super old text just casually being reused centuries later in a completely different culture for, a burial ritual.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting for me. Like, was that just a random coincidence? Someone in ancient Egypt just happened to have this old Etruscan linen lying around? I mean, what are the chances?
It's possible, I guess. Alexandria, where they found the mummy, was a major trading hub back then, so maybe it was just like random stuff you could find lying around a busy port city. But you got to think about the other things buried with the mummy. There was papyrus from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, too. That make it seem more like a deliberate choice, you know what I mean? Like there was some kind of connection between the two cultures, maybe.
So maybe the mummy had Etruscan ancestry. Or was there like some kind of cultural exchange happening that we're just now starting to understand?
Could be. The fact that this book, 300 years old, was used to wrap a mummy in Egypt, it suggests that Etruscan culture, or at least their stuff, traveled further than we thought. Makes you wonder, what other traces are out there, just waiting for us to find them?
I love how something as simple as a linen book can lead to so many questions about the past. But let's switch gears for a sec. Let's talk about a mystery that we can actually see but still can't figure out, the Voynich Manuscript.
Ah, yes, this one is a real head-scratcher. We've got this beautifully illustrated medieval manuscript filled with all these bizarre plants, strange astrological charts, even women bathing in these interconnected tubes. It's wild. But the writing. Nobody's got a clue.
I've seen pictures of it. Visually, it's stunning, but the writing, forget about it. It's like staring at alien hieroglyphs. And it's been stumping people for centuries, right?
Oh, yeah, decades of attempts. I mean, we're talking the world's top code breakers, even fancy AI algorithms. Nothing. It's like the ultimate puzzle box, daring you to crack it open. And of course, with a mystery like this, there are going to be theories.
Oh, yeah. Tons of theories. What about this Edward Kelly guy? Was he just a con man, or did he actually believe all that stuff about talking to angels?
Ah, Edward Kelly, the 16th century alchemist and, as he claimed, angel communicator, a fascinating and controversial figure to say the least. He claimed he could talk with spirits and even discovered a language they used called Enochian. Some people think he created the Voynich Manuscript as a big, elaborate hoax to impress potential patrons, especially Emperor Rudolph II. That guy was obsessed with, alchemy and the occult, all that stuff.
So basically, the Voynich Manuscript could just be a really, really fancy fake, like the 16th century version of snake oil.
It's possible, but even if it's a hoax, it's incredibly well made. Think about it. Over 170,000 characters, something like 35,000 words. That's a lot of work for a simple con.
That's true. And there are other theories, right? Not just the hoax one.
Right, there are. One theory is that it's some super complex cipher meant to hide, top secret information. Maybe the key was lost a long time ago, or we just haven't figured out the right way to approach it. Then there's the theory that it's a natural language that nobody knows about.
Like a lost language from some forgotten culture. Now, that would be amazing. Wouldn't we have found some other trace of it by now, though?
You'd think so, right? But what if this culture was super isolated, or maybe their civilization got wiped out by some disaster, disease, something like that? It's a long shot, I know, but not impossible.
Sounds like something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. So we've got ciphers, lost languages. What else?
Well, there's the constructed language theory. Imagine maybe someone like John Dee, advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. He was really into the occult and this idea of a universal language. What if he created a brand new language from scratch?
Huh, interesting. But wouldn't a constructed language be easier to decipher, though? It wouldn't have the same natural complexity as a language that, evolved over time.
Maybe, maybe not. The creator could have thrown in some cryptography or other tricks to make it harder to understand, maybe to protect their work or only let certain people understand it.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious conspiracy theory territory. Secret societies, hidden knowledge, all that Dan Brown stuff.
Well, history is full of examples of people doing crazy things to keep their secrets safe. Back then, knowledge was power. So it's not that far-fetched to think someone might have created a language specifically designed to be impossible to understand for outsiders.
Okay, so where do we go from here? How do you even begin to tackle a puzzle like the Voynich Manuscript?
Well, one thing that's been helpful, though not a complete solution, is statistical analysis. Researchers have found that the manuscript has some statistical properties that match up with natural language.
So it's not just random gibberish.
Right, but it doesn't tell us what language it is, or if it even makes sense.
Another piece of the puzzle, but the big picture is still missing.
Seems to be a recurring theme with the Voynich Manuscript. But who knows, maybe someday someone will crack the code and we'll finally know what it really is.
Until then, it's a reminder that some mysteries are just too complex. Maybe they'll always be just out of reach. But hey, that's part of the fun, right? The journey is often just as exciting as actually finding the answer. Speaking of journeys, let's switch gears to a mystery that's a bit more grounded in history and faith. The Ark of the Covenant. I gotta admit, I need a little refresher here. What was it exactly and why was it such a big deal?
Picture this, a chest. But not just any old chest. This one is made of acacia wood, covered in gold. And inside, according to the Hebrew Bible, are the 2 stone tablets with the 10 Commandments, given to Moses by God on Mount Sinai. It symbolized God's covenant with the Israelites, a sign of his presence and power. And if you believe the stories, it wasn't just symbolic. It could do some serious stuff, parting rivers, bringing down walls, even zapping enemies.
Okay, so we're talking like biblical superpower level, not just some important religious artifact.
Yeah, exactly. And then poof, it vanishes. The Bible mentions it being kept in the temple in Jerusalem, and then silence. Nothing. It's just gone.
Wait, so nobody knows what happened to it? A thing that powerful just disappears?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And its disappearance has fueled all sorts of theories and speculation for centuries. Was it destroyed when the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem, hidden somewhere secret under the Temple Mount? Or maybe taken to some far-off place, maybe even another continent?
Ooh, now you've got me hooked. Let's break down these theories. What are some of the most likely explanations for where the Ark went? Okay, so we've got this incredibly powerful, artifact that just vanished. Where do you even start looking for something like that?
Well, there are a few theories that have popped up over the years. One is that it got destroyed when the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem. They weren't exactly known for being, gentle, and they definitely looted the city and took down the temple.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, but it seems kind of, I don't know, anticlimactic for something so important to just get smashed to pieces, right?
Right? And there's no real proof that it happened. The Bible doesn't say so directly, and nobody's ever found any archaeological evidence. That lack of, like, a smoking gun is what's kept all these other theories alive.
Okay, so what are some of the more, shall we say, interesting theories then?
Well, one theory says that the prophet Jeremiah, he saw the Babylonian invasion coming, so he hid the ark to keep it safe. Some people think it could be hidden in a secret chamber under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
Like a hidden vault under one of the holiest sites in the world. That's totally an Indiana Jones movie waiting to happen.
Right. And the Temple Mount has this crazy long and complex history with all these tunnels and chambers. Some of them haven't even been explored yet. So it's totally possible that something as important as the Ark could be hidden down there.
But wouldn't someone have found it by now? People have been poking around that area for centuries, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. But some folks think the Ark isn't in Jerusalem at all, but out in the Judean desert. Finding the Dead Sea Scrolls in a desert cave kind of gives this theory some weight.
So it's just chilling in a cave, waiting for some lucky archaeologist to make the discovery of a lifetime. I can already see the headlines. Lost Ark of the Covenant found in desert cave.
Yeah, that would be huge. But the most famous theory, and probably the most intriguing one, is that the Ark ended up in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, seriously, how in the world would it have gotten all the way to Africa?
Well, Ethiopian tradition says that it was brought there by Menelik I, who they believe was the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba.
The Queen of Sheba. Wow, we're going way back into biblical lore here.
Yep. The story is that Menelik, I went to visit his father in Jerusalem, and when he came back to Ethiopia, he brought the Ark with him. It's been a story they've told for generations, and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims to have the Ark to this day.
Has anyone ever tried to, like, confirm that? It's a pretty wild claim.
The Ethiopian Church is very protective of the supposed Ark. Nobody from outside is allowed to see it. So for now, it's all about faith and tradition.
Okay, so we've got hidden chambers, desert caves, and a trip to Africa. Does it get any crazier than that?
Well, there are people who believe the Knights Templar took the Ark to Europe during the Crusades. Others say it's hidden somewhere in Egypt, maybe even under the Great Pyramid. There's no shortage of ideas, that's for sure.
Sounds like everybody wants a piece of the Ark mystery. But even if we never find it, just searching for it tells us a lot about how we think about history, faith, and the power of stories, you know?
Yeah, totally. The Ark of the Covenant has become something bigger than just an object. It's a symbol of something much deeper, a testament to the power of faith and the human need to connect with the past.
Well, if we can't find the actual Ark, maybe we can at least explore its legendary powers. What can you tell us about those?
One of the most famous stories is about the Israelites crossing the Jordan River. In the book of Joshua, it says that when the priests carrying the ark stepped into the river, the water just stopped, split right down the middle, and the whole Israelite nation walked across on dry land. It's a story that's been told and retold for, like, forever.
Wow, talk about biblical special effects.
Right, and there's more. It's also said that the ark brought down the walls of Jericho. The Israelites marched around the city for 7 days straight, carrying the ark and blowing trumpets. On the seventh day, boom, the walls just crumbled.
So putting rivers, collapsing walls. This Ark sounds pretty powerful, but were these like actual events, or are we talking about metaphors and symbolism here?
That's a question people have been debating for centuries. Some believe the ark had some sort of real, maybe even scientific power. Others say the stories are just symbolic, ways of showing God's power and protection.
So some people think there was actual real science behind these events. I've heard theories about it containing radioactive materials or even acting like a capacitor, storing up electrical energy.
There are those theories, but there's nothing solid to back them up. We have to remember that we're dealing with ancient texts, written in a completely different time and culture.
Okay, so maybe the Ark's powers were more, figurative than literal, but even as a symbol, it clearly meant a lot to the Israelites.
Absolutely. It represented their connection with God, their history, who they were as a people. And even today, the Ark still captures the imagination, inspires all kinds of books, movies, video games, everything.
It's the power of a good story, right? But let's jump back to the world of actual writing, back to that enigma that is the Voynich Manuscript. We talked about the theories, but I'm curious about the actual attempts to figure it out.
Oh yeah, over the years, so many people have tried to crack the code. Some of the earliest attempts focused on cryptography, the science of secret writing.
So they were looking for patterns, hidden messages, that sort of thing.
Exactly. One of the first big names to try was William Romain Newbold, a philosophy professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He was convinced it held ancient secrets, maybe even alchemical knowledge.
A philosophy professor trying to break a code. Sounds like a character from a detective novel.
He was definitely an interesting guy. Newbold spent years studying the manuscript, using intuition and linguistic analysis. He even said he deciphered parts of it, claiming it was written in some ancient Greek shorthand.
Did it hold up? Was he right?
Nope, unfortunately not. Other scholars looked at his work and found a bunch of mistakes. Seems like his enthusiasm got the better of him.
Oh, that's too bad. So back to square one.
Not exactly. While he didn't succeed, Newbold's efforts made the Voynich manuscript more popular and got other people interested in its mysteries.
So even in failing, he contributed to our understanding of it, in a way. So if a philosopher could crack it, who else gave it a shot?
Well, another big name was John Manley, an American professor of English literature and a top expert in cryptography. He'd even worked with the U.S. government in World War I, breaking enemy codes.
Okay, so this time we've got a real code breaker on the case. Did he manage to crack the Voynich code?
Sadly, no. Even with all his experience, he couldn't make any progress. But his work was incredibly thorough and systematic. He created this super detailed analysis of the manuscript structure and patterns, which was really important for future research.
So even though he failed, he still helped us understand the manuscript better.
Exactly. His work helped make the Voynich manuscript a legitimate subject of study, not just some weird curiosity.
You mentioned World War I, and that makes me think of another famous code breaker, William F. Friedman, the guy who cracked the Japanese Purple Code in World War II. Did he ever try his hand at the Voynich manuscript?
He did. Friedman was like a legend in the cryptography world, and he was definitely intrigued by the Voynich challenge. He put together a team of experts, they called it the First Study Group, just to work on it.
So like the Justice League of Code Breakers, did they finally crack the code?
They spent years on it, using all kinds of techniques, statistical analysis, pattern recognition. They even started using early computers to help with the analysis.
Wow, they were going all out. So what did they find?
Well, even with all that, Friedman and his team couldn't solve it either. But they did make one important observation. The Voynich Manuscript showed statistical characteristics that were similar to natural language.
So it wasn't just gibberish. That kind of backs up the idea that it might be a real language, right?
It does. But that doesn't mean we'll ever understand what it says.
So even the best code breakers of the 20th century couldn't crack the Voynich code. Makes you wonder if there's even a code to crack, or if we're all chasing after something that isn't there.
It's possible. But then again, history is full of examples of mysteries that seemed impossible to solve, and then boom, someone figured them out.
So maybe there's still hope for the Voynich manuscript.
Maybe. The pursuit of knowledge takes time. Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen when you least expect them.
Okay, so we've talked about the early attempts to decode the Voynich manuscript, but what about more recent efforts? Technology's come a long way since Friedman's time. Have computers and AI gotten us any closer to understanding it?
They have, in a way. Computers have been a game changer for cryptography and linguistics. They can process tons of data and find patterns that humans would probably never see.
So they could potentially see connections in the Voynich text that we just can't.
Right. And back in the 1990s, a researcher named Gordon Rugg used statistical analysis software to study the manuscript.
What did he find? Did he manage to decode it?
He didn't decode the whole thing, but he did make a pretty important discovery. He found that the text had patterns that were similar to natural language, but also some really unique differences.
So like a language, but not quite. Almost like someone made it on purpose to be hard to understand.
Yeah, exactly. Rugg's work made people think even more that the Voynich manuscript might be a constructed language. Like someone sat down and created a language that would be super hard to figure out.
Intriguing, but if it is a constructed language, who made it and why go through all that trouble?
Those are the big questions, right? Maybe they were trying to protect some secret knowledge, or maybe they just loved language and wanted to make something totally unique.
Well, whatever the reason, it's definitely working. People have been trying to figure this thing out for centuries. But it's not just statistical analysis that people have tried, right? What about artificial intelligence? Has AI been able to shed any light on the Voynich manuscript?
AI has been a game changer in so many fields, and it's been used on the Voynich manuscript too with some pretty interesting results. Like in 2017, researchers from the University of Alberta used a machine learning algorithm to analyze the text, and the algorithm suggested that the language might be Hebrew.
Hebrew. Wow, that's a twist. Did anyone follow up on that?
Researchers try, but so far nobody's been able to definitively say that it is Hebrew.
So another clue, but the mystery lives on. It seems like the Voynich manuscript really wants to keep its secrets.
It does, but that's part of what keeps people coming back to it. They keep trying new approaches, new technologies, hoping they'll finally be the one to crack the code.
It's like a puzzle you just can't put down. Even if we never figure it out, trying to understand it is fascinating in itself.
Totally agree. And the Voynich manuscript reminds us that there are still mysteries out there, things we don't understand, codes we haven't broken.
And sometimes just trying to find the answer is as satisfying as actually finding it. But before we get too philosophical, I want to hear about one more theory about the Voynich manuscript. It's a little out there, but I have to admit, it's pretty cool.
You're talking about the alien theory, right?
Yeah, the idea that the Voynich manuscript was written by aliens. What's the story behind that one?
Well, some people look at the weird illustrations in the manuscript, especially the plants and the star charts that don't seem to match anything on Earth. They think those might actually be drawings of alien plants and maps of alien constellations.
So they think the author was drawing alien plants and mapping alien stars.
That's the idea. And some even think the writing itself is an alien language, so different from anything we know that we haven't been able to translate it.
I can see why people who are into aliens would love that theory. It's definitely more exciting than some medieval alchemist making up a hoax.
It is. But is there any real evidence for the alien theory?
That's what I'm wondering. Is there anything besides the weird illustrations and the fact that nobody can read it?
Not really. Most scholars don't take the alien theory very seriously. They say there's no proof, and that even though the manuscript is unusual, it can probably be explained by human history and culture.
So the simplest explanation is probably the right one.
That's usually the case. But even if the alien theory is a long shot, it shows how fascinated we are by the unknown and the possibility that we might not be alone in the universe.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up our look at the Voynich manuscript. It's a mystery that continues to amaze and confuse us. A reminder that there's so much we still don't know about the past, about language, about the world around us. Speaking of mysteries, there's one more that I want to talk about. This one is a little closer to home, geographically speaking. It's about a bunch of missing churches in Wales.
Missing churches? How does a church just disappear?
That's what I thought. Apparently, there are a bunch of churches that were mentioned in historical records, but nobody can find them now.
That's interesting. It's like a real-life historical treasure hunt.
Exactly. And what makes it even more interesting is that these missing churches were usually in remote areas, which makes the search even harder. So where do we even start? What are some of the theories about what happened to these churches?
Well, one possibility is that they were just abandoned, and over time they crumbled. A lot of these churches were built centuries ago, and without anyone taking care of them, it's not surprising that they would fall apart and eventually collapse.
Okay, that makes sense. But wouldn't there be something left, some kind of ruins, even if the church itself is gone? Like a pile of stones, a broken foundation, something.
You'd think so, right? But in some cases, there's literally nothing. No foundation stones, no crumbling walls, nothing to show that a church was ever there. It's like they just vanished into thin air.
That's so creepy. Gives me chills just thinking about it. So if it wasn't just neglect and decay, what else could have happened?
One theory is that some of these churches were taken apart on purpose, and the materials were used to build other things. Stone was valuable back then, and it wasn't unusual for builders to reuse materials for older buildings, especially in far-off areas where it was hard to get new materials.
So they just took the churches apart and used the stones to build something else. It's like medieval recycling. But wouldn't there be some kind of record of that? Some document that says a church was taken apart?
You'd think so, but historical records from those remote areas are often spotty or incomplete. It's hard to put together the whole story of what happened hundreds of years ago.
Okay, so we've got abandoned ruins and repurposed materials. Any other ideas about these missing churches?
Well, some researchers think that some of these churches might have been built on sites that were later found to be bad for construction. Maybe the ground was unstable or the area's flooded a lot. Over time, the landscape can change a lot.
So maybe these churches were just victims of nature, swallowed by the earth or eroded away by the weather?
Exactly. It just shows how difficult it can be to reconstruct the past, especially when you're dealing with remote areas and patchy historical records.
Okay, so abandoned ruins, repurposed materials, lost to the elements. Anything else?
Well, in some cases, there are, let's say, more creative theories.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What kind of creative theories are we talking about?
Some local legends talk about churches that were swallowed by the earth or disappeared into thin air, maybe because of divine intervention or some kind of supernatural force.
Ooh, spooky. I love a good ghost story, but I'm guessing most historians don't take those legends too seriously.
You're right. It's important to be a little skeptical about those kinds of stories, but they definitely add to the mystery of these missing churches.
They definitely make it more interesting. So we've got a whole range of theories, from the believable to the supernatural. But have there been any actual discoveries? Has anyone actually found one of these missing churches?
There have been a few successes. Researchers have used old records, maps, and even ground-penetrating radar to find the remains of churches that everyone thought were lost forever.
That's awesome. So it's like a real-life archaeological puzzle, putting together clues to find these lost pieces of history.
That's a great way to put it, and these discoveries often give us fascinating glimpses into the lives of the people who lived in these remote communities centuries ago.
I love how something as simple as a missing church can lead to so many questions about the past. But it looks like we're running out of time for today.
We are, but our journey into mysteries doesn't have to end here.
It's incredible to think there are still so many hidden stories out there waiting to be discovered, even in a place like Wales that people have lived in for centuries.
It shows that we're never really done learning about history. There are always new things to discover, new ways to look at things.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into ancient mysteries and all those crazy codes.
We've covered a lot today, those ancient Etruscan linen books, the super mysterious Voynich Manuscript, and of course the legendary Ark of the Covenant.
And we even managed to fit in a hunt for missing churches in Wales.
It's been a wild ride through time, exploring the edges of language, history, and what people believe.
What stuck with you the most from all these mysteries?
I think it's the power of the unknown that gets me. These mysteries are still so fascinating because they represent the things we just don't understand yet. They make us think differently, question what we think we know, and be open to the possibility that there are things out there we haven't even imagined.
I agree. And even if we never completely solve these mysteries, just trying to understand them can be really rewarding. It pushes us to learn new things, explore new ideas, and broaden our horizons.
You got it. And who knows, maybe someday someone will figure out the Voynich Manuscript, find the Ark of the Covenant, or stumble across the ruins of a lost Welsh church.
And maybe those discoveries will lead to even more mysteries, more questions, more adventures in the search for knowledge.
That's the beauty of it all, right? The journey never really ends.
Well said. On that note, I think it's time to say goodbye for now. But before we go, I want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been awesome exploring these mysteries with you.
And to everyone listening, keep your eyes peeled, stay curious, and never stop searching for the amazing hidden things all around us. You never know what you might find.
Yeah, it really is. Makes you think, huh? Like how much more is still out there just waiting to be found? Even in a place like Wales that people have been living in for, what, centuries?
It's crazy, right? There's always more to learn, more to uncover, never a dull moment when you're digging into history.
Totally. So are we ready to wrap up our deep dive for today?
Yeah, I think so. We've covered a ton of ground today. Those ancient linen books, the Voynich Manuscript that nobody can crack, and of course, the Ark of the Covenant. Still can't believe that thing just vanished.
Oh yeah. And who could forget those missing churches in Wales?
Right, that was wild. It's been an amazing journey, exploring language, history, belief, all those things that make us human, I guess.
Absolutely. So much to think about. What really stood out to you from all these mysteries?
Honestly, it's that reminder that there's still so much we don't know. Like all these mysteries, they show us the limits of our understanding. Makes you realize there's a whole lot out there that we haven't even begun to grasp.
Yeah, and even if we never fully solve them, the process of trying, of like wrestling with these mysteries, that's what's really rewarding. It pushes us to keep learning, keep exploring, keep asking questions.
Exactly. And hey, who knows? Maybe someday someone will crack the code of the Voynich manuscript. Maybe someone will find the Ark of the Covenant, or stumble across one of those lost Welsh churches.
It could happen.
And maybe, just maybe, those discoveries will lead to even more mysteries, more questions, more adventures in the pursuit of knowledge. That's what keeps it exciting, right?
Totally. The quest never really ends.
Well said. On that note, I think it's time to say goodbye for now. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a blast.
It really has. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, keep your eyes open, keep those brains curious, and never stop searching for those hidden wonders all around us. You never know what you might find.